Hello, everyone. My name's Daniel, and I'm back with updates on my studies of the tribulation timeline and the coming fall of Babylon the Great and the Rapture. If you've been following my channel, then you know that I was looking at the 27th day of the second month in the flood, as in the days of Noah, which I put at the 13th of November. That day has come and gone, and so clearly that wasn't it. So let's factor that information into things and see where that leaves us, because we still have 5 prophecies pointing to 2024 being the year. So I'm pretty confident of the year. We've just got to put together the other pieces of Scripture, and I found some very interesting things that I'm going to go through real quick, because it's possible that tonight could be the night. I'm just studying things and showing patterns and showing day counts from feast days according to the full moon calendar, and seeing where things line up. This is just so that you all don't have to go and look at the sun, moon, and stars, figure out the dates, figure out the times between them. And you can just get the boiled, distilled information. So let's see what we have here. What I've done is I've created 3 years in question. The start of the tribulation in 2024, the desolation of the abomination in 2028, and the end of the tribulation in 2031. Because we got a 7-year period with 2 periods of 1,260 days. And everything has to fall into that. So I'm mapping these 1,260 days, going backwards from the end and seeing where we end up, and then looking at different scenarios. So I've got 3 different scenarios, 4 if you include the failed one. And we're going to see what went wrong, what things can carry over and is still in play for the days ahead. I think we are very close. So, in my previous expectation, I was looking at the 27th, and so what I have here is the biblical months here. So the 27th is past. It was on the 13th of November 2024, and that's now passed. We are now entering the 16th of November in the United States. It's already there for Israel. And so all these are based upon Israel. Israel only had 29 days this past month, whereas in the west coast of the United States, we had 30 days in this particular month. If I'm doing things correctly, just based upon where the moon starts and where the moon ends. That was an interesting discovery. So that's where we are. We are on a new moon, or a new month, which is a full moon by my understanding. It's a super moon today. It's super bright. And it happens to occlude the Pleiades visible from the United States. The Pleiades are the 7 sisters in the constellation Taurus. And the moon is going to cover them, which is exactly what happened during the fall of Babylon in 539 BC. So that's going on tonight, which would make tomorrow morning, or about right now in Israel, so it is now the first day of the 9th month in Israel. And so if we assume that that's the start, and we add 1,260 days, that takes us to the 5th day of unleavened bread in 2028. So this is 2028. This is where it ends on the 28th of April, as inclusive of that date, is the last day, which is in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which goes from the 15th to the 21st. That's the 7 days of unleavened bread. So that would be a time times and half a time, if you are counting like feast days. You have Passover, Passover, Passover. So times, and then half a time would be in the midst of Passover. That's one way of looking at it. And then, of course, that's just the midpoint. You add another 1,260 days to that, and including the Day of Atonement, you get October 9th and 10th of 2031. So here's the different scenarios. So we're looking at this top scenario here, which starts today, and goes clear through the end of the Day of Atonement, whereas the scenario starting the flood, it goes up to the Day of Atonement, with the Day of Atonement not being inclusive in the day count. So that's the difference between how this works. And so that shows you how there's a couple days play that you can have in how you interpret things. So I was going off of the assumption, hey, it starts on the day of the flood, now let's go. But if we ignore the day of the flood and we just say, well, we know it's going to end on, or we suspect it's going to end on Day of Atonement on October 9th and 10th. Remember, Day of Atonement starts on the 9th day of the month. It just so happens that in 2031, the first day of October is also the first day of the 7th month, which makes it really easy. So that's a really convenient appointed time to end on if you start today on a full moon. And of course, we have the proverb that talks about the woman whose husband's taken a bag of money and he's going to return on the full moon. So a full moon should always be an interesting time to watch. So that's a very nice timeline, and it works well considering that the moon is in the same spot with covering Pleiades as it was when Babylon fell. Saturn is in Aquarius, and of course Jupiter is in retrograde in the horns of Taurus. All three things happened during the first fall of Babylon. So that's the writing on the wall theory that has the midpoint occurring during appointed times and ending on an appointed time. So if it's not today or tonight, then we have to say, well, what's the next potential date? And I want to consider the arrival in Mount Sinai on the third day of the third month, which we know that that's with the calendar flipped, but there's two calendars, they're mirrored. So the third month is analogous to the ninth month. So the third day of the ninth month could be related to the arrival in Sinai. There's not a lot that the scripture talks about happening in the ninth month other than Hanukkah, which is on the 25th of the ninth month. So they arrive on Sinai, and then 3 days later, we have thunders and lightnings and all the things that Revelation describes on the day of the Lord occurs, and that would be on the sixth day. So the third and the sixth day, or that window of time, could be compared as similar to when they reached Mount Sinai. And if you read the parallels, that's very fascinating. While I'm here, I want to point out that under the theory that it starts tonight, we've got the sorry, I took that back. My original theory had the thunders and lightnings of the tomb opening when Yeshua rose. There's also thunders and lightnings and people like dead men and everything. So we've got that occurring in the middle of unleavened bread on the 16th day. So that's a similar thing. And that also happens in Revelation right after the two witnesses raised from the dead. So we've got thunders and lightnings mentioned with the resurrection of the two witnesses, with the resurrection of Christ, and with the Mount Sinai event. So what is interesting is the end of 1,260 days being the fifth day of unleavened bread. If you go back 3.5 days, you end up on first fruits. So you have thunders and lightnings at their death, which I think could make sense if they're killed with an army that's nuking Israel. That would be a good parallel if there's thunders and lightnings. And then, of course, they rise on the third day, or 3.5 days. That 3.5 days is interesting. What is a half day? And then there we have it. So the other scenario we have is that, so he comes back on the analog to the third day at Sinai, which would then have 1,260 days, conclude on the last day of the Passover at Nazaret. Remember, the seventh day of Passover is also referred to as the Nazaret. And if you go back 3.5 days from that, you end up on the 18th, which is the day after, I guess, right in the middle of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So the witnesses could be resurrected on the Nazaret of Passover. And then if we go to the 6th day, which is when the voice came from Mount Sinai, gave them all the commandments, and they were terrified and trembled, and there was also lightnings and thunderings and everything else, which you'll find in Exodus chapter 19. That's the other potential date. But if you follow that, you don't end up with any appointed time at the midpoint. But at the end of 2031, you end up ending everything on the first day of Tabernacles. One of the things I did in this study was to consider different definitions of 80 years for Israel. If you count 80 years as 80 lunar years, then you'd have to ask, when does this lunar year end? And one of the things that I discovered was that Israel was 80, turned 80 on the Atzeret. May 14th, 1948, was the Atzeret of second Passover, which occurs in the second month. I think that needs to be there. So I say, well, when is the Atzeret of the second month in 2028? And that's way out here in the end of May. I think that's 20th, so around June 1st. But, of course, Israel's solar years end on May 14th. So this is our window for everything being complete. And there's very few days left where we can start the count and have an appointed time at the midpoint and an appointed time at the end of the tribulation. So it's either tonight or the 3rd of November. 18th of November, the 3rd day of the 9th month. So those are the two dates that I think work the best, with the 6th being starting to push you way out here. And then beyond that, there's just not a whole lot that works, because you end up with, at most, another week or so until we get the end of 80 years, or 80 solar years, or about one whole month, I guess, if you do the lunar method. So our window of potential days is shrinking, so our probability of finding the right day is increasing exponentially as we move forward. So of all these dates, there's only one date that has the signs in the sun, moon, and stars align so well with what happened when ancient Babylon fell. Let me show you Sorry, here it is. All right, so this is the supermoon, including the candlesticks, as viewed from Washington, D.C. Tonight from, I guess, midnight to 3 a.m. This was Central Time. Sorry, that is Eastern Time. So it's midnight to 3 a.m. Central Time, U.S. So that right there is what the moon looked like, and behind there that's Pleiades. And this is Pleiades during the fall of Babylon. Babylon fell on the 12th. This is the 11th. So you can see how this could be a sign that maybe not today, but tomorrow, the day after the new moon. But either way, we are very close. That lines up. And the sun is in the scales. And the sun was also in the scales in this date. And Jupiter is in the horns of Taurus in retrograde, just like it is now. It was 30 days retrograde in the original fall. It's about 40 days retrograde now. Saturn is under Aquarius, also in retrograde. So all those things are repeating. So that's a lot of things to line up on those 2 different years. So that's my summary. I hope this message gets to you in time. And if not, we will keep searching. Thank you.